everybody, and welcome to the Lawyer Life Podcast, a podcast about lawyers and their thoughts on matters political, personal, and professional. I'm Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Hello, Darlene. How's it going?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm doing okay. I'm good. What's new? What's going on this week?
This is just a week of me trying to find a new way to be after the election is over, the news. I'm reading less news, which we'll talk about a bit, and just trying to resettle into a new routine and figure out what that looks like. And I'm hearing that from not just people in my close orbit, but you're seeing it in the press as well.
Yeah.
I think we're all doing that. Are you doing that?
To a degree, but we talked a couple days ago and you were on the way to the gym. How did that go?
Well, I made it, and that's a real victory. And I hope to make it again today. And I've been very much out of I do walk pretty much every day. I do try to get active every day, but the gym and I have a complicated relationship. So I do want to get back there, especially in the winter when it's cold. That's where I want to be. So I'm doing it. I made it.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. I had a nice day yesterday. I did one of my book a full day in Toronto things where I check in with some clients, have some coffees, have some lunches. I also saw a couple old friends who I hadn't seen for a while. And it's so nice. I guess, I don't know if it's just still having young kids, but there is something that feels so unique to me about sitting across from somebody for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I had a great lunch with an old friend and just having undivided attention for a singular conversation with no distractions whatsoever, and being able to be quite playful in that conversation. And it was great. It was lovely to see a bunch of people and get caught up and also just have some laughs. And I want to do it more. I don't know if it's why, even when we're at a party, you're at a neighborhood party or whatever, it's always stuff's too much is going on. And it's hard to have a quality, really in-depth quality chat with somebody. Maybe it's the introvert in me. I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I love so much. So I'm going to put that on my list in terms of new habits that you're talking about. I need to get across from one or two folks for a good amount of time just to have a really nice in-depth chat. Yeah.
That is kind of becoming a lost art, isn't it?
It's just, I feel like there's such a lack of opportunity for it. I don't I don't know. I don't know what's happening. There's no third. Have you heard about all this, the concept of we've lost our third place? This idea of in the 50s and 60s, you had work and home were places, 1, 2, but adults had a third place that they routinely went to. It was a bar or a bowling alley or being a member of a civic club or these things where naturally you would be out during the week or perhaps on the weekend. Also something just for adults, which is maybe what we're getting to, which is we're obviously quite focused on our kids now in the new model of parenting. But these were places you went just for this experience of just sitting with people, and just that was it. That it was about just being out in the community, being out in the world, being with people. And I feel we don't have that much. Churches were another third place, by the way. I missed that one.
I was thinking churches,
yeah. And the qualifiers were on this low cost, so open to the public, low cost or no cost of entry. There was maybe that was it, but the idea of you can just go, it's accessible, and you're going to be with people in the community. And there's not much of that.
Do you know what that reminds me of? Is that in those third places, which I've just learned about as a concept for the first time, but in those places, you would also run into people that you hadn't chosen to spend time with, but you shared something, right? That's very interesting, because I do think that is something that we've almost swung so far in the other direction. It used to be if I could just choose the ads that I see, if I could just choose the music that I listen to. And now it's kind of wow, look at my little curated world. But I don't know. And I wonder if we're less tolerant of people intruding on our carefully curated worlds these days. Anyway, maybe that's a topic we could talk about that one for a while. And
also,
actually.
I feel those are the places. I had this actually with one of the old friends I was talking to yesterday. I was asking them questions because we have a depth of relationship and because we were having a great time. We were talking about stuff that you could like I could we couldn't we couldn't probe around, we couldn't like carefully discuss in any other situation. Like and it was that's where
Mm.
learning happens. That's where I feel like like kind of opinions can be formed or revisited, or you can learn new things. And also, since you're sitting across from the person, even if even if there is a difference of opinion, there's more of a spirit of we're kind of learning about this together. And instead of just like reading something, responding to it online or whatever,
Or not.
there's an inherent obligation to treat the other thought as human, right? And
Mm.
there's less judgment, I feel, there. So I know that we're going to talk about the news, and I just like I don't know. On that note, I guess we could transition to it. I can't. I was about to say it, and then I'm like, don't say it, because I myself am tired of the polarization conversation. I like.
Yep.
I don't know. I think we're all aware. I don't know if there's anything new to say on it. Do you know what I mean? And
Yes.
maybe it's just also where we're at. Where yes, we're in Canada, but we also really were engaged in the news cycle during the presidential election for, I want to say, at least a year.
Felt like 5 years.
It was all there was in the news, and now that obviously hasn't completely changed, but it's shifted. You were saying that you have a maybe a new manner of practice as it relates to the news. What's that?
Well, so I said on our team call yesterday that for my fun topic, I said, let's talk about what everyone's watching and reading because I have this giant gaping void in my schedule that used to be filled with reading the
Sure.
news.
Yeah.
And I need to stop doing that just for a while anyway, because I do think that right now there is a lot of opining, and I think it's hard to not be blown around by it, just
Mm-hmm.
to kind of, I would like to just retreat to my corner, having read a few responses, having had our own discussion with David Moskrip, which I've been thinking about a lot, having thought about where I sit in this whole equation. And I think I have come to the point where what I want to read is common ground stuff. So where do we agree? Where's the overlap? Where's the Venn diagram between people where we can get things done and move forward as a society? And that's not really where the news is at this exact moment. So I'm just going to hang out on the sidelines for a bit. But there was a really great article in the New York Times. It says the liberal New Yorkers who say they're tuning out the news. And so this article is all about how people like me are not doing their usual voracious consumption of various newspapers. But I thought what was interesting about it is that it speaks from the platform side. So it talks about how, here's the stat in the article. MSNBC, so in the week after Election Day, so November 5th was Election Day, I believe, the network averaged 500,000 viewers a day, which was a decline of 39% compared with average
Mm-hmm.
viewership in October.
Mm-hmm.
So just reading that stat reminded me that there are all these enormous businesses that depend on
Yeah.
us
The
all
audience. Yep.
tuning in, giving our attention, being wrapped up in the drama. And it is a heavily kind of monetized exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
perhaps that affects the message, right? Like the medium is the message. I just think that I need to take a step back and decide where my kind of, I don't know, where I'm going to read news and how I'm going to read news. My son was suggesting to me, because he said, like, you're on your phone. I'm not allowed to be on devices. Why are you on your phone? I'm like, well, I'm reading the newspaper. When you see me at this time in the morning, what I'm doing is reading the newspaper. He's
Yeah.
like, well, get a paper then.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is something
Yeah.
that I've wanted to do because I suspect this conversation was
Mm-hmm.
coming. And, I should do that. That's one thing. Just get a paper and just be a passive consumer of the entire newspaper rather than a stat that reads certain articles.
Yeah.
I think I'm very aware of the algorithm in our daily lives these days. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is what I think. And a number of my friends have shared they are stopping with the news as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we re-engage with it in a normal fashion and not
Well,
become one of those people that reads 5 kind of inflammatory articles and gets all reactive. You know, you feel it in your body when you're being reactive like that. And I don't want that right now.
yeah. I heard somebody talk about it was like, well, I think the way I summarize it is keep aware, don't obsess, right? And so pre-internet, you were
Mm,
up with the news if you watched the news at 6 o'clock or whatever, 11 o'clock or
yeah,
whatever it was
that's right.
daily. You so for a half hour or an hour, you sat and you're like, okay, give it to me. Thanks a lot. See you later. And that was you had that period. And outside of that period, or reading the newspaper in the morning,
You were
there
free.
wasn't any. The news interaction was zero, right, until the that habitual period came back. I think that's a way to look at it. So yeah, maybe you're like you're going to choose where you're going to get it from. You're going to choose your time, get up to date. Okay, I understand this is happening. I understand this is happening. I understand this is happening, and then let's move on. I'm trying to get to that space. It reminds me a little bit about like we talk about sports a lot. It's like I'll obsess about the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Blue Jays
Mm,
during their season. I'll read any source that tells me anything. I'll listen to podcasts about them. Once their season's over, like get out of town. And that's a little bit the way I feel about the election. I wanted to know because
hmm.
you're trying to figure out which way it's going to go, right? That's all it is. And then it happens, and you're like, okay, and we have 4 years in a different country that I have no control over what happens within effectively. So I'll monitor, I'll be aware, but I'm not going. And I said this yesterday in the hockey dressing room. We were talking politics, and somebody was talking about the cabinet appointments, and I was like, I'm not going to let that. That's what I feel like. That's part of the play is letting that emotionally get to me, or me obsess about or talk about constantly how silly it all is or surprising. I'm just not going to do it. Whatever, like I will read it. I'll be aware of it, but I'm not letting it get into my body or really, take space or time or energy from me. But
I think that's right because I think we've mistaken, you know how I always used to say, don't mistake motion for action? I think that's the
yeah,
thing about the news that's been troubling me is just that we are basically watching a ping pong ball. Like it's sort of, your sports analogy is interesting. So you're watching this drama play out, but you have no control over it. You're not taking action on politics. You're sitting at home having an opinion is not an action. And that's why I think that for the foreseeable future, what I would love to see is just a lot more effort at what are we doing here? We
yeah,
haven't, because I don't think that you can, unlike a sporting event where the season has ended and the Leafs have won the Stanley Cup,
yeah.
huh? Insert prolonged laugh. Anyway, I
Yeah.
don't mean to insult your team. I don't actually have too many hockey affinities, so
Mm-hmm.
it's only a joke. But I think that the season doesn't end in this case, right? It doesn't get replayed next year. We are stuck with whatever happens from the election. And we as voters, I mean, we don't get to vote in that particular election, but we do have our own politics that affect our lives. And I think it's a wake up call to get in there and figure out how to be truly active and try to do the hard work of politics, which is to not throw rocks at each other from opposing sides of the field. I wouldn't say it's easy, but people do it and that's kind of fun. It's sort of sporting, but it's
Yeah.
trying to get things done and live in a better world at the end of the day is sort of the goal. So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about.
It is the doing, right? It's not.
Not the
If you want to
watching.
post your opinion about something on the internet, you do your thing. Like I think what has become quite clear to me is the real way to affect change and to push things into society toward the way you want it to go is to dedicate your time, your talents, or your treasure, right, your money to the causes. That's I think where we need to focus our energy. There's some third place stuff in that too, because if you're out there,
Yes.
then that that checks that box as well. Going back to the first thing we were talking about, but um, Yeah, so for me, it's like awareness of the news is important, but then instead of really spending energy and all that on, yeah, I guess the sportification of news and politics, it's mostly just like making sure I'm doing something positive in the real existing world, supporting organizations that are doing that, and that's the stuff that really matters, I think.
I, you know what? As we're speaking, I think David Moskrip got me thinking this way because when we asked him at the end of that interview, "What do we do, or what do you suggest, other
Mm-hmm.
than pet your sweet dog?"
Yeah.
which was like actually probably very, advice that a lot of people could put into play right away. He said, get involved at your community level and become more,
Yeah.
remember you live in the real world and go there. And I
Yeah.
think that was really good advice. I think that's been sticking with me without me kind of putting it together until this moment. But
Yeah.
yeah, get out there. That's
Speaking of
what you
getting
did
out
at your
there,
lunch.
I'll get to the next topic on our wonderful run sheet here. I was out there. I was out there in the world last Sunday at an event in my town, and I was sitting beside a neighbor who is a leading researcher on addiction, drug addiction. He's a leading researcher, professor at a university, and a topic came up that links really well with a topic that you put in a rundown, which we were talking about. He's doing studies now on cannabis addiction and how, so that was surprising me because I was always like, oh, they've always said it's, you can't get addicted to it. He's like, that's definitely wrong. Uh, you know, and then the topic came up of there is a kind of an idea in that space of because it was legalized,
It's fine.
it's fine, that it's not harmful. And so it was an interesting conversation on obviously that's not the case. Cigarettes are harmful, alcohol is harmful. I think also a thing that came to mind for me is like, oh, social media is harmful, but we don't regulate it in the same way. You can access it as a minor. It's completely anyway. That's a conversation for another day. But we've been talking kind of in drips and drabs across the first few episodes about um, the new post law world that's kind of existing as it relates to uh, growth of businesses
Everything.
and the new approach to growing those businesses aggressively and quickly. Um, and it all feels kind of linked. It feels like as things open up, there isn't that kind of pushback, that natural protective element of still like it can exist, but under these conditions, right?
I just feel the reason, so I put on our agenda for the pod, I put on there that I would like to talk about how everywhere I look, there just seems to be the government is taking the walls down on a lot of things. So sports betting was the one that I was thinking of when I was watching football and I put it down. I'm like, wow, in the course I skipped the ads, but if I didn't, I can just see, right? So I'm not watching the full ad, but I can kind of see as we're going by. If I were to count, and I might next time I watch, there were just so many prompts to sports betting. And whether I tend to be subliminally affected by advertising. So,
Mm-hmm.
I will sometimes, it has become a joke in my house where if there's a billboard near our house, we will soon have the product that's being
Mm-hmm.
advertised on the
Sure.
billboard. And I will do it with complete lack of awareness that that's what has happened. So I was noticing the sports betting thing and I was just thinking, I'm starting to think that's a normal thing to do. And this is something that's been illegal in, I don't know a lot about it. But as a sports observer, my kids are in there, they're learning that sports betting is a thing. And these are all things, whatever they are, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, cannabis, gambling, even if they're legal, it still requires a lot of personal diligence, discipline,
Mm-hmm.
etc., to not become addicted. And some people are genetically more likely to be addicted, or situationally, or don't have, who knows, insert reason here. But I think what I see is just that so many things are being put in our hands as legal, and so it's like two things are happening at once. all these things that used to be illegal are now legal and sort
Yeah.
of condoned by polite society. And then these laws that used to ban things or to set up things, for example, we used to have taxis that ran on a certain legal licensing scheme. Now we have
Mm-hmm.
Uber. You know, there are all these things where the laws have become just porous. I guess is
Mm-hmm.
just the way that I would say it. And they're kind of the feeling that I'm starting to just have all the time is that there are no adults in the room. I just feel like that. And then when I'm dealing with my children, I'm looking at how do I teach them about this stuff. And I've just decided, and the message we're giving them is you just have to learn discipline at this age. You
Mm-hmm.
have to understand values, character, moderation, integrity, knowing what's right. You have to learn that and internalize it because otherwise you cannot fend this stuff off. I really think that because I don't know. It's just everywhere you go on social media. I didn't even mention that one, but yeah, how do they manage all this, these guys?
Well, there's a great, so I've only listened to a few episodes, but Michael Lewis of Moneyball fame,
Yeah, I love
his
his stuff.
newest podcast season he's on Pushkin, which is Malcolm Gladwell's company. His newest podcast season is about sports betting, and it starts with the Supreme Court in the U.S. striking down a law that effectively will cut the federal ban, and the sports leagues went from this is sports betting is could be the end of the integrity of our sport to embracing it, licensing with the major betting companies, bringing in a massive cash flow, and as Michael Lewis calls it, basically like continuing to squeeze the fan for every dollar they're worth, like finding a new way to get more money from fans. He revealed, I did not know this about sports betting, is that if you're too good at it, the platforms kick you off. So
Oh,
it is really like from per his account, you know, yeah, it seems like open it up and let people do their thing, but then like they really if you figure it out and they basically see in your account that you bet properly on a line that then moved in your favor basically, and that happens too much, they will kick you off. And they've given an example of that a few times in his podcast. So it's yeah.
but isn't that true of like a casino too? Like, don't they come move you?
Well,
I would not
this
know
is their
because I'm.
argument is that, but it's not the same. Anyway,
Why is it not the same? I'm
well,
interested.
counting cards, they'll say counting cards is cheating,
Okay,
right?
fine.
Um,
Also a skill.
which I don't know. Is it just a strategy? I don't know about gambling. Whatever. I'm not the
Me
one to talk
neither.
about this. But really, like, it's funny to open up the opportunity for people to bet on sports, and then if people create like I know people I father on my daughter's hockey team last year, he was a professional sports bettor because he built an algorithm himself that just produced good results. Anyway, I maybe for another day, but there's a lot of I agree that there's a lot of potential vices out there, and they I think disproportionately are affecting young men, and I think that's something to be attentive to. I know friends of friends of friends who have effectively bankrupted their families, who causes marital issues. Like there are a lot of downsides that come along with sports betting, and it shouldn't be treated lightly. I think it could be quite destructive, and I also think it was a major mistake to allow the unfettered
Ads.
advertising of the
Yeah.
product at the outset,
What?
especially featuring celebrities and having that lifestyle effect like we don't see in tobacco, we don't see in cannabis, we don't see in alcohol. When you have the major stars of these leagues, promoting them as aggressively, especially as they did off the top, I know in some jurisdictions that has shifted and lessened in some ways, but I think that was a major mistake, especially well, here in Canada, and at least speaking to the province of Ontario, to allow for that advertising to exist. It is apparently sports betting companies in the US are the biggest advertisers, period, above
That
auto,
makes sense.
above alcohol and beer. So it's a massive industry that the really like I think can do serious damage and prey on people's vulnerabilities. And a good example of I think a place where we need to protect folks. And when you are up against massive um, corporations in this space, there needs to be a counterweight. And I'm not convinced there is a counterweight on pieces like this.
And don't you think too, it's a little bit of, well, I don't know. I'll ask it as a question. Is it a form of spillover of this idea of big government is bad and regulations are bad, and we this idea that the person is responsible? Like there is this kind of coalescing right now of people who, and we have talked about this on our own podcast back in the day. Well, not back in the day, we still are focused on some of these things, but you take care of yourself, you're focused on wellness, you're focused on meditation and all these things. And some of that wellness narrative also can be like, I'm in charge of making my own choices, right? Like there's a bit of an overlap there. And so is it part of that? Is it kind of just like, well, you're on your own, kid. You always have been, just to use a lyric. Are we able to deal with this level of this is real freedom. Like to me, when you can just go make a sports bet, buy legal cannabis, this is not the world that I grew up in. We didn't even have warnings on our cigarette packs. If you think about that, I mean, let's just date myself a bit, but back in my day, there was what we called the smoke pit in our high school, in the middle of our high school, where people could go and smoke. And the age was 16, and then the age was raised, I think just shortly thereafter. And now, nowadays you look at social media and there's no age. I mean, there is an age limit in the terms and conditions, but most parents are not observing the age limits. I shouldn't say most parents, but a lot of parents aren't. There are children on social media apps, and it's not treated as a cigarette for sure, although there's a lot of push towards that. So I guess the reason I put it on the list, and I think this has been an interesting conversation, was just to say, what does it mean when something's legal? And what do we do with that? Like, can our brains accept that? And what I cannot reconcile is how there's this new push to legalizing things that used to be illegal, but there's also this simultaneous push to get rid of systems that used to work for us. Like I liked the taxi system. I'm just going to get out there and say it. I would have liked, the taxis to make a better app in the beginning, but I do like regulated industries. I like getting in and having a meter and, a person with, I don't know. I know that the Uber there's a whole thing to it, but anyway, we can talk about that in another episode. But I think that the idea is there's a removing of controls that I just don't know if as humans we're like ready for.
Yeah. And also I think the last thing I'm saying it's I think as well, it's not just the laws, it's also society figuring it out and perhaps and then the laws start to reflect. So social media is an example. It's just the Wild West, and now there's the real conversation about it. There's too much data, anecdotal and scientific, to show that like this is really bad for young people. Right now we're seeing the push. I think as well, when I was talking to that researcher I mentioned off the top, I don't think that we are well equipped to have the cannabis conversation with young people right now. I think that generally parents will talk to their kids about alcohol, about the dangers of alcohol, about, drunk driving, about, how alcohol can really ruin lives. There are alcoholics, this sort of stuff. I think that largely cannabis is still like use is more under the rug. It is still stigmatized. And I don't know if the playbook, so to speak, for parents has been built for properly warning and advising our young people about it. And anyway, that's probably a different conversation. But my point being, it's not just lawmakers and lawyers and, but it is also like there has to be the critical mass. There has to be folks that are really coming out and saying, protect us, like do more. This is we can't, it's very hard for Canadians to band together independent of the government and say, don't let our kids on social media before 16, right? Because there's always going to be a few people that do it, and then kids need to be on it because somebody else is on it, blah, 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 blah. But at some point, as you said, adults in the room have to put their foot down and say, this isn't going to make us popular. This means less money for, potentially companies located in our jurisdiction or otherwise. This means I might not get reelected. All that sort of stuff. But the right thing to do is to make sure that kids, as they're developing and they're so vulnerable, aren't subject to the thing that is built to addict them, right? On top of all the other stuff. So anyway.
It's very dire. Normally we have a bit lighter topics, but anyway, I think it has to be talked about, though. This is where I'm kind of going with it. It's just like, I find that what's the most concerning, and I guess this is why in my brain I link things like Uber to these discussions, because, and not just Uber, but any sort of rideshare app or any sort of regulated industry that was once regulated and now is sort of very much in the hands of a single tech company on which everybody rents space. Like that's what these are. They're tech platforms. But I think that the alignment that I see is just when you're not paying attention, things move fast. Things move fast, and it took a long time to make those things. It took a long time for people to say, you know what is bad? Unregulated hotels. I was thinking, my husband brought this up the other day. One time we were staying in New York, and on the back of the hotel room door, it said the maximum room rate for this hotel is $1,200 a night or something, way higher than what we were paying. And I thought, that's weird. There's just a law that just randomly sets a maximum hotel rate. But then now, when I'm trying to book things and I just think, what is happening with these hotel rates? Like, is there an algorithm that basically says 20% of the hotel is full, so the rooms cost this versus like everything has changed. I don't think you can interact with a single thing nowadays without questioning what the algorithm and data collection is doing to the pricing, which is part of inflation, and you sound the thing that I think this recent election cycle has really highlighted for me, and also a book that I'm reading, which I hope to talk about on future episodes of the podcast. But, the language to say, hey, I think we need to slow down. That's not usually language that progressive people who want the world to be better use. That's just not usually how we talk. And I think that's one of the things that's so confusing, is just that generally I support progress, but I support it on the right terms. Like in the music business, I supported a move to the beautiful streaming environment of convenience, but it came through, it started as a pirate world, which is how a lot of these worlds start. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to talk about. I don't think, maybe it's not just a once in a podcast kind of chat. I think it's hitting so many pieces.
I think that this will be a continued thread for us for a while, because it's just so relevant. It's continued as a trend. That was quite a chat. I need to go have a nap on this couch behind me, and then we'll come back and we'll do our goods and our gripes.
Okay.
Okay, and we are back with our goods and gripes. Goods are things we want to promote and support, and gripes are things that annoy us. I think I went first last week, so I would like to give you the floor, Darlene. Do you want to good? Do you want to gripe?
I will good. I don't know if I've said this in the past, but I really appreciate a good lawyer book or television show, even though I deeply understand that is not how real lawyering goes. And I think I've said this before, but I'm watching The Lincoln Lawyer right now. And third season, I think, which I've been waiting for ages. And I just really, I see why people watch these shows and want to go to law school. It's not really what it is to be a lawyer for most people. But if you were such a lawyer, and it was just enjoyable. And they only show like the high parts really. And they show like a little bit of like, oh, there he is reading some papers for a bit, but like just for a bit, not for like a weekend. And if he does, it's kind of cool how he's doing it. It looks sort of appealing as a concept. Yeah, I don't know. I love that. That's a good. What's yours?
Nice. My good, there's just like really talented people that have just been on my radar for a while that I want to recognize as good, and I appreciate what they're doing. The first is a Canadian artist who's they're still starting out. They're called Sister Ray. They just came out with a new single called Animal Thing, which I recommend people listen to. They're great. Okay. And I hope for a long and successful career for Sister Ray. The other is, so there's a comedian actor from Alberta, Darlene. I think she's an Edmonton product.
Like me.
Named Lisa Gilroy.
Okay.
She is down in LA. She's in the improv scene. She's in a bunch of podcasts that I like. I think she's the funniest person ever. Like, I think she is absolutely like fall down hilarious. She just like, I think her first big role for television, this show Interior Chinatown came out on Disney Plus. It's a bit of a meta show where the show's about a guy who is kind of obsessed with like TV procedurals, like police procedurals. And then the cops who come to Chinatown are those cops from like a procedural. So it's a bit of a wink at like CSI and whatever. And Lisa Gilroy plays one of the like CSI cops, which is a good role for her. You don't get her full range, but she is absolutely fantastic and worth checking out in any capacity. And I do hope she also hits big because she's very special. She has special talent. So those are my goods.
That's awesome. I love that you yeah, that's great. And as I've said on the podcast before, you have introduced me to a number of very good comedians. So I will definitely take that suggestion. You want to go first with your gripe?
Yeah, I had one, but today I was motivated to change it. My gripe is the new Microsoft Outlook.
Really?
I can't. Why did we change? I feel like who had a complaint about the old Outlook? Who was like, I wish this like looked differently and moved things around slightly on the screen and made it just less visually appealing. It's so cluttered. It's so weird. There's functionality that's gone and I don't know why. And it's a fix for no reason. And it's making me less productive and it's annoying me. And I don't know why it happened. And I'm upset. I don't like the new. I've given it time. I really have. I've tried to work with it, but you can like toggle back to old Outlook. I want to do it so bad. I'm trying to do new Outlook as much as I can. I miss old Outlook. I like it. I don't know why we're changing things. When they work, just leave them. Focus on some other stuff. I don't like the new Outlook at all.
Don't fix what's not broken. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, that's a good gripe.
Are you on new Outlook?
I feel like if I were to out myself, I'm pretty sure I reverted very quickly. But I do still have that sliding bar from the right. I don't know. Maybe I'm on the new Outlook. You know this thing on the right that shows you when you've been mentioned? That is, I don't know. I don't love that. I don't love a lot of things about Outlook at this time. And I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's too much. Just I want to see my emails come in. I don't need to see if there's a little picture of the image attached. I don't need to like see independently the PDF. I don't need all of this razzmatazz. Get out of town. That's what I say.
Fair
Go home.
enough.
Get out of here. New Outlook. Gripey.
I have to just give you a follow-up on one of your gripes, which was that I didn't include the Zoom link in the email for our podcast recording. So as a follow-up, I would like to convey to you that my sister, with whom I have a weekly family Zoom with our parents, and I am the organizer, would like me to convey basically a quote. Please tell Mike that is super annoying and you don't do it in our family. And she said, unbeknownst to me, that they are just every week just digging through their emails trying to find these.
Yes.
But I'm like, but for my parents, I'm like, do you Zoom with anybody else? Literally anyone? But I guess they don't. And like,
But
they
even
don't,
if they
but
did,
yet, I know, but it
you
doesn't
still
help
have to
them.
go searching for the link. It's not just sitting there for you.
Listen, I've always been the the holder of the Zoom account and the inviter to meetings.
Yeah.
So I did appreciate that. Not only did I immediately resolved your gripe.
It's great. And honestly, I clicked on the link today and the satisfaction that I had was immense. Yeah.
Like, you raise a concern and I'm like, yes, this is a fair call out and I'm going to fix that. And then, like, I didn't even know my sister listened to this podcast, and yet here she is, and she's got her feedback from Mike. So anyway, my whole family is,
if you just do one thing that helps the lives of one listener, it's worth it. Darlene.
Yeah, one listener. Who is the family?
Is your sister.
Family member of one of the hosts. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I thought the feedback from one of your family members that you mentioned pre-recording, I was worried it would be bad. I was worried I was going to get my hand slapped for something, but I found a supporter.
Way.
Okay, great.
No, my family, my family are supporters of Mike and the podcast for sure. Mm-hmm. I was just going to say I have an actual gripe of my own, and I just need to understand if other people share this gripe. So I'm going to put it on this podcast. I just feel like there was a time when food at coffee shops was good. I used to like getting like a scone at Starbucks.
Okay.
But, like, why do they have the same things? Like the same couple of things for so long? I don't understand. Like, do people like the blueberry muffin at or whatever the insert food here? And it doesn't have to be just Starbucks. I don't know. I feel like there should be more rotation or more, the millions of people who go, can we have some change it up from time to time? I don't even go that often, but I've just completely eliminated coffee shop food from, that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Is this just me?
I'm with you.
I'm wondering.
So my wife and I dropped off the kids this morning and then went to a local coffee shop, and she got a scone and a coffee, and she's like, what do you want? I was like, I'm just going to wait till we get home.
Nothing.
It's not none of this is worth it. I can make coffee at home and make my own little breakfast sandwich and be a happy boy. I don't need it. Yeah. I don't like spending money on that kind of stuff anyway. So,
well, local shops I might exclude. I think
this was a local shop that actually does.
Right.
I would say they do mix up their thing, and you probably would like their baked goods.
And they don't have as much of a scaling issue. Like, I understand, and I while I'm standing in the line, I do ponder these things, but I just want, in the beginning of Starbucks, they had a raspberry chocolate scone thing that was awesome. And then they just decided it was going to be these other things, and I don't like those things. I mean, people do, clearly. Yeah. Like, the data shows that, Darlene...
Isn't Starbucks, they got the new CEO because they've been going... You didn't know this? Yeah, I think they had a tough year or two, and now the guy who ran Chipotle is the CEO of Starbucks. And they're
okay. I do think I saw that.
Change. Hopefully get you your raspberry thingy.
Like, come on. Anyway, I don't know. That's just the thing. I barely, when it's fun to go around the world thinking of what my gripes are. Yeah. And being like, oh, good gripe. I do have a gripe about that.
That is a good one.
Anyway, that's it.
I like it. Yeah. Back in my day, we had real scones at the Starbucks.
I know. Gosh, that was twice in one episode. Oh, and gosh, now I'm like Joe Biden. Oh my goodness. Anyway, just stop me now.
Not joking around.
Just stop me now, please.
Listen. Anyway, okay. This has been great. Thanks for the chat. We will talk soon.
Talk soon.